Hi, everybody. This is Chloe and Eileen, and we are here today with a 3-lesson unit plan called Alloy YUCK. It is 3 lessons that are interdisciplinarily woven together with science and English foci. Here to talk about it more is Chloe.
Thank you. So the essential questions for our unit are: 1, how did the ecological disaster in the Alawai Canal begin? 2, what are different proposed solutions to the problem, and how does each affect different stakeholders? 3, how has the pollution in the Alawai Canal affected the organisms and overall ecosystem of the immediate and surrounding environments? And 4, which solution do you support and why? The first lesson in this unit is going to look at the background information, where students do a bit of a haul, researching the causes and effects of the Alawai Canal pollution. The learner outcomes for this lesson are that 1, students will comprehend the various sources provided by the teachers. 2, that students will find their own sources to use. 3, for students to synthesize their findings into a presentation. 4, for students to teach their peers about their subtopic. And for 5, to students write the key takeaways from their peers in a reflection form. Students will demonstrate understanding of the background of the issue through their group slideshow presentations and through the peer presentation forms. So this is the worksheet that students will be given that goes into more detail about the jigsaw activity. So part 1 is when students are in their expert groups and will be researching the different subtopics as well as synthesizing the research into a slideshow presentation. So each expert group will be assigned the subtopic, and then they will talk quietly with their group members to decide how they want to put that information into their own words and then into slides. The teacher will remind them that their slide should have bulleted information that's in their own words and uses plenty of visuals. And the presentations aren't going to be too long, only 5 to 6 minutes each. Once that's done, we can move on to part 2, which is when students will be in their teaching groups. And each member of the teaching group will take a turn explaining their subtopic to their group members. As the other students listen, they can take notes on what their group members present so that they're prepared to do part 3, which is the peer presentation reflection. So when everyone's finished teaching and learning from their peers, they will write full sentences explaining their main takeaways from each of their group members. For both of the other 2 subtopics, students don't have to write about their own topic. They also will have to write 1 question about each of the subtopics, including their own, that will get them excited for the rest of the unit. So the 3 subtopics that students can they'll be assigned, is 1, the causes of the pollution, 2 is the effects of the polluted ecosystem, and 3, the solutions to the pollution. And each subtopic has a variety of written source material as well as some videos, and students will be encouraged to also find and use any other resources that they like. Alrighty, so moving on to our next lesson. So once students have a good idea about the ecosystem and the issues surrounding it, we'll move into a more detailed look into the biotic and abiotic components of the ecosystem in a collaborative lab, looking at the biodiversity in the canal. So the general outline is here, that in lab groups, students will be using microscopes to examine water samples from 1 nearby healthy stream and then 2 from the Alawai Canal. The general learner outcomes are here, that students will write a clear and justified hypothesis, that students will properly use the microscopes, that students will work collaboratively to collect data and create the graph, and then that students understand how the biotic and abiotic components of a polluted ecosystem, the Alawai, differ from a healthy one. And students will demonstrate their understanding of this through their completed lab report. This is the lab worksheet that students will be given. So we can see that the purpose here is that students will learn about microscopic organisms in the local environment and compare them to those found in the polluted Alawai Canal. So the procedure, pretty straightforward, that students will get their sample, make their slides, and then observe them using the microscopes. They will observe the following and record their data in the worksheet, which includes a full-page colored drawing of the sample with the labeled organisms, and then a chart that says what types of organisms there are, how many there are of each, and a description of the different organisms, including size, color, shape, number of limbs, and any other observations they would like to make. Then they'll record the quantitative data from their sample, including temperature, pH, and turbidity. And then they're going to repeat those steps for both of the water samples. So here is what students will actually be using. Basically, they just fill in the hypothesis with a reason why they believe that. The data will be partly taken on a separate sheet so that they can do their drawings. And also here is a table for the stream water sample, including the organisms, how many are present, and a description, as well as a place for them to record their 3 quantitative measurements. They have the same thing for the Alawai Canal sample. Then the analysis questions are when students will be comparing the two. So it asks how many different types of organisms were found in each sample, how are the types of organisms in the 2 samples similar, and how are they different, and then how might pollution affect the variety of organisms present in the water sample, which is kind of the big idea here. I will hand it over to Eileen to go over lesson number 3.
Great, thank you. So lesson 1 was a little heavier on reading. Lesson 2 is a little heavier on inquiry, specifically scientific, although, there is reading and writing involved in both of the lessons so far. Lesson 3 is really heavy on voice and choice. In groups, students are going to consider all the evidence that they have learned about from the prior 2 lessons, and they're going to come up with their own solution. So in terms of what we're looking at, they're looking at what are different proposed solutions to the problem and how does each affect different stakeholders? Which solution do you support and why? So after having read about different methods to tackle this Alawai situation, students can either decide in their group, so they have to brainstorm, they can either decide to support one of the proposed solutions that already exists, or they can decide that there needs to be a brand new solution and they can make one up. After the group decides on their own solution or a solution to support, in small groups, they will write a persuasive paragraph that is organized and supported. Then they get to choose a speaker from each group to present their ideas to the class. The goal is persuasion with well-supported arguments. After all the groups have been able to present their ideas, then we'll take a class vote. This can also be done as an exit pass, but personally, I like to call on students and let them, share their thoughts and ideas. So we'll do a class vote, see if any hearts and minds have been swayed by the persuasive writing and speaking that occurred in this lesson. And then we'll see which solution to the Alawai problem is now a favorite of the class. And then you can call on a few students to share, like if their thoughts changed, if they were swayed by anyone's evidence, etc. So with these 3 lessons, science and English lenses are used throughout because you have to read, you have to analyze, there's inquiry, there's hands-on work, there's brainstorming, there's writing, there's presenting persuasively, etc. And we do consider some differentiation for different learning types. Students who are English language learners could always write in their native language and have a group member translate. We also have a sample graphic organizer for anyone who's not writing at grade level or English language learners. So the other benefit of working in a team or in partners, which all of our lessons involve, is that you can rely on strengths of some team members in different areas. So not everyone is going to speak. There'll be one speaker from each group. Not everyone has to write, etc. But you all contribute your ideas. And part of the formative assessment in all 3 lessons is the teacher being involved actively in the room, making sure that students are on track with leading questions and just making sure that they seem to know what they're doing the work on the, at the right pace, etc. So we have a lot of oversight and observation from the teacher, guidance included. And then for a summative assessment for lesson 3, We do have a rubric for the presentation. So in terms of this one, it's a pretty simple one. Of course, the categories can be doubled or tripled if you prefer to have, a different number as your total. But with a very simple 5 being the highest, 0 being the lowest, and just 4 categories, we look at 4 sections of the presentation: an attention getter, organization, supporting evidence and sources, and conclusion. And these do go hand in hand with our goals for the lessons. So this is easy for a teacher because, of course, the teacher normally would write their own rubric. I wrote this up, and so I would be familiar with the content of the rubric. And as the person presents, I can take notes on the side, and then I can just circle a 5 or a 4, a 3 or a 2, a 1 or a 0, put an X in the box, put a check mark. I can mark it any way that I feel comfortable. And then the student can easily see how they got the score that they got, and they can see some areas, opportunities for growth, as well as areas that they do pretty well in. Chloe, could you bring up the worksheet that shows lesson 3, please? Thank you. So in terms of the writing activity, basically in groups, we start out brainstorming because that's an important part of the writing process. So they're going to consider everything that they've learned in the past 2 lessons, the hands-on experience, seeing all those organisms, counting all those limbs. They're going to consider all the articles and videos that they saw in lesson 1 and decide together if an existing solution is worth pursuing or if they should come up with a new solution. Then they have persuasive writing. So here there are a few bullet points that must be included in the writing, and this connects directly to the rubric. So of course we want to let them know what's required. So there's an interesting attention getter, which is meaningful and relevant to the audience, a clear explanation of the current proposed solutions for the issues in the LOI Canal, and which solution is the best one, with support and evidence from the previous 2 lessons. They have to explain who will be involved in the proposed solution. For example, where does the money come from? Who supports it? And make sure that it works long-term, of course. And they have to finish with a strong conclusion. Remember, their goal is to be persuasive and to convince the class to basically agree with them. So after the writing's done, we have a peer presentation. 1 member of each group presents. And then we have the peer reflection, which can be done any way that a teacher prefers. It can be a journal, it can be an exit pass, but I enjoy doing a class vote and then calling on a few students to share if they did or did not change their minds based on the evidence that has been presented. So that is our LOI YUCK unit plan, combining science and English. It's a fun, gross, interesting local issue that we feel is a good way to get kids thinking about real issues at home, how they can be involved, and you can't really ignore it when you're looking through a microscope at organisms in the water. It really makes the issue come to life. Chloe?
And just to finish up with our enduring understanding. So by the end of this unit, after students have found, researched, and synthesized the background information, after they've used the microscopes to look at the organisms in the polluted canal and compare them to a healthy canal, and then they've written a persuasive argument in favor of a solution and shared that with the class. We hope that they have gained a solid understanding of these 5 enduring understandings. So number 1 is that anthropogenic changes in an environment can cause detriment to an ecosystem and threaten the survival of some species. 2 is that humans depend on the living world for resources and other benefits provided by biodiversity, but human activity is also having adverse impacts on biodiversity. Those are focused mainly in the first lesson. 3 is that conservation is founded on 3 core principles: that human activity has damaged the environment, that there is a civic duty to maintain the environment for future generations, and that scientific, empirically based methods should be applied to ensure this duty is carried out. 4 is that conservation decisions must have long-term results in mind, including environmental impact, economic feasibility, and long-term maintenance. And 5 is that every individual is capable of finding solutions and making a positive difference in their community. And those 3 are really hit on in lessons 2 and 3.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. Well, we look forward to teaching you our lessons next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Huzzah!
And cut.